Well, welcome. I would like to speak about something that I think most people perhaps may not necessarily be thinking about. At the start of every year, we all have aspirations, goals, resolutions, targets, hopes, and dreams of what the future and particularly the new year will bring. We make such intentions, sometimes known, by capturing them in written forms or affirmations or proclamations and sharing this in various ways blogs, videos, on social media, and with our intimate partners. The one area that in the few minutes that I have with you, that I would like to speak about is relationships. Relationships are fascinating, but I do find relationships to be fascinating. And I compare a lot of relationships or the concept of a relationship to a plant. It needs to be, first of all, started as a seed. It needs to be planted in the right soil. The soil and the seed have to come together in covenant to allow for some form of gestation. The seasons of life and the seasons that come by nature have to allow the seed to go through several transformations, and it breaks through and breaks forth from the soil and blossoms. But when it blossoms, it has to be nurtured. The soil has to be kept in the right state, and overall, there's some responsibility between planting, seed time, and harvest. And if you do that properly, you have a continuation of a life cycle of a process. And relationships are not too dissimilar. We start from a seed and we hopefully have a supply that provides our nourishment and our nutrients. We have a soil that we go into covenant with, and seasons that perhaps enable our relationships to blossom. Unfortunately, not every relationship will blossom. Sadly, that is part of life. And I thought perhaps what I should do is give you 6 or 7 reasons why possibly, if you are in a relationship and have a significant other, or wish to have a significant other, 7 reasons why potentially this year your relationship could potentially not blossom as much as you would love, or perhaps even fail. Now, I will combine those who are in relationships with those who are looking to start new relationships. The first reason: feelings-based decisions. Now, whether that feeling is defined as love, or infatuation, or lust, or whatever derivative of love that we all have, decisions we make based on feelings, recognizing that feelings are simply an emotional state expressed as emotions, have a lifetime, a shelf life, and at some point, the same feeling of love disappears. And therefore, love never gets the job done. Making feelings-based decisions in your relationship will potentially be one of the most important reasons why the relationship fails. It has to be more and much more than love. Love is a feeling. It changes. Our emotions can be quickly altered and changed. Some bad news, some irritating news causes us to act differently to how we originally felt when we were in love. Number 2 is the lack of knowledge of the rules of the game. And when I talk about the rules of the game, I hope you understand that the rules of the game is a euphemism for understanding how relationship dynamics work. Whether you're starting a new relationship or whether you are in an existing relationship, there are rules. If you understand the rules, then you understand how to win and how to keep winning. Like football, there are rules to playing the game of football. Those rules are defined. If you understand the rules, then you're able to, in many ways, allow yourself to play within the boundaries of those rules without feeling that things are perhaps unfair and things are perhaps too rigid, or that things are not going your way. In relationships, in dating, and for those who are looking for long-term relationships or who could be in long-term relationships, there are rules that continue despite your ignorance of the rules. Now, I talk about these rules in other videos, but let me share a few. Each and every one of us has a value. Our value, in many ways, is determined by what we think we are worth. That's an internal decision. But there is a marketplace where other people determine our value and place a price on what they think they're willing to exchange to be with us. Price, value, cost, and worth. Most relationships will fail not because your value is too low, but because the cost of being with you sometimes has become unbearable. Those costs are self-inflicted. The way we behave, our mannerisms, our temperament, our attitudes, our physical appearance, all of the things that we most of the time can control but refuse to manage carefully, determine the cost of being in a relationship with us. When the cost of ownership or the cost of being with another person exceeds the perceived value received from being in that relationship, often people decide to exit the relationship. So one of the rules to understand is your mate value throughout the life cycle of the relationship, from inception to the early stages, to the mid stages, and until the end of the relationship. And understanding how to reinvent yourself to ensure that your value is at the optimum level. It might be confusing, but let me use an example. A building is constructed. There is a cost to constructing the building. The people who construct the building need to be paid, need to make a profit. The developers need to be paid, need a profit. All of the costs for constructing the said building is called its overall construction, development, or purchase cost. As part of that process, there is a perceived value that will come as a result of owning or ownership of the building. But once a building is constructed, it starts to deteriorate, dilapidate, with sometimes use and without use. So every year, if you own the building, assuming you paid £100 and refuse to reinvest into the property to ensure that both the structure, the services, the landscape are kept in optimum state, as close to as possible as when it was originally constructed, the value of the property will decline over time. For those who maintain the property, renovate the property, refurbish the property, keep it clean, the perceived value will at least for a longer duration, hold its original, you could say, original worth. So, a lack of knowledge of the rules of the game can affect and can influence whether a relationship blossoms or dies. Most relationships this year will come to an end because most people do not understand the rules of the game. Both parties, or one party, is ignorant and thinks that their original value, their mate value, stays the same all the way through. And sometimes we let ourselves go. The third reason is because we have an inner circle, friends, family, loved ones, confidants, advisors, who are too scared to tell us what we should know based on what they have observed. So for example, let's just say, assume I meet a young, attractive woman and I want to move from just dating to relationships. And I take her to my friends and my family, and they all talk about how beautiful she is. But nobody talks about the observations they have made about her character, her temperament, her past, her behavior, and other observations that they may have gleaned from the interaction that they have had with her. Assuming they never bring it to my attention because they're too scared of losing the intimacy they share with me, then I will go along believing that I have the best piece and the best prize. Unfortunately, if my decisions are based on feelings, number one, or number two, lack of knowledge of the game, at some point, the failure of my inner circles and their refusal to enlighten me or direct me will come back to bite me. It's quite simple. Most people's relationships this year will fail because you do not have people in your corner who have the confidence and who have the courage to tell you the truth and what you need to hear. And number four is a simple one. I have said this before. Your relationship will fail because there is something that you have defined yourself by, or there is something in that relationship that defines you, but sadly that also limits you. And at some point this year or in the future, you will come to the realization that what defines you limits you and places too much of a restriction on you exploring your full self. You will try to break free. Breaking free would mean you want to explore something else. Now understand that if that definition was the core reason for the relationship to even begin, there will be conditions that would have been set as part of that initial interaction. For example, you're the lady who the man knows to be the one with the long, full hair, and he's in love with you because of your hair. Maybe a good reason for his attraction to you is the shape of your hair and your face. If for some reason you've been known as the lady who carries a certain head of hair, and that has been, let's call it, your defining feature, and for some reason something happens, you develop cancer, you have an accident and therefore have to shave your hair, and you go bald. Suddenly, the original condition for the intimacy, which was physical looks, will be unavailable to the other party. Wherever there are conditions, there will be disappointments. Disappointments will lead to people not being satisfied. So you have two things happening. You, the individual, you've been defined by your physical attributes, and it's placed a limit on you. For some reason, you have to break free. Breaking free will cause both you and the other person to come to a realization that there is something much more about you that they weren't aware of, and that you perhaps were not aware of. Seeking for that new definition, seeking for another part of who you could be, may lead to issues where one person is unhappy or two people are unhappy. And if you're not careful, that might lead to the end of the relationship. Now, number 5 is something that I alluded to previously: failure to understand the rules of the game. Number 5 is failure to learn the tenets of the dating and the relationship marketplace. I use the word game because it's something people are familiar with, because we want to win. The dating marketplace is what I call a zero-sum marketplace. People are there simply for their self-interest. They have a need, they want that need to be met, and they will explore methodologies, and they will use anything possible to achieve that goal. For men, generally speaking, we just want sex in the dating marketplace. What drives us is sex. Now, women might want something different. Men will use whatever currency we have: game, our masculine frame, intelligence, wealth, money, power, influence, education, knowledge, humor, charisma. We will use anything possible to achieve what we want, which is sex. It's a zero-sum process. One person benefits, usually at the expense of the other, although you can have mutual benefits. The relationship marketplace is a positive sum game, but parties are there for the long term, and therefore want the best for both parties. And therefore, because it's a positive sum game, people come in good faith and peaceably. In the first marketplace, people come believing it's war. To the victor goes all the spoils. Your relationship could fail if you don't understand the tenets of each marketplace and how to play the game. But more importantly, the failure to understand the journey of your life cycle, both as a man and as a woman. Now, I will not go into more details on this particular items for several reasons. One primarily being time. Now, number 6. Number 6 is one that most people do not associate much importance to. Number 6 is poor negotiation, and the inability to negotiate carefully and to communicate directly. People are very, very, very unique. We make the mistake of thinking that we will never change. Now, I have said before, women have to understand this about men, but it applies the other way around. There are needs that we have as men that we are born with. There are some needs that are seasonal. There are some other needs that we cultivate over time. So, in dealing with a man, you have to separate his wants from his needs. But when you come to his needs, try to delineate which needs are core functional needs, which other needs are seasonal, and which other needs have been recent appetites that he has developed. And carefully know how to satisfy those needs without compromising or losing too much of yourself. Our core needs: men need sex. We do not want sex, we need sex. A cultivated need could be the type of foreplay we may have developed an appetite for. That appetite may have come from a previous relationship or our imagination or social media. A third could be a seasonal need. Perhaps we go through a phase, business, stress, unhappiness, where we drop off in our desire for sex. And you, the woman, assume that we are seeing someone else. And you make such a big deal about it. But we cannot get ourselves to tell you that our creativity and the energy for creativity is the same as and can be translated to the energy for sexual activity. And if a man is not happy in his creation, work, purpose, goals, dreams, aspirations, sometimes he affects his ability to be loving and kind, nurturing, and sexual. But you, the woman, make so much noise and assume that there's something fundamentally wrong with your relationship without understanding that it's a seasonal need. The decline of his sexual appetite is seasonal. Let him get through the dark moments and he'll come back to being the same man you've always known. That is number 6. Number 7, finally, something else. This category is self-explanatory. I don't know what that reason could be, but it will fall under the category of something else. It's up to you to discover what that something else can be and have gatekeepers to prevent your loving relationship or to prevent your relationship that you built over time to come to an end. And if you haven't started a relationship, to have the judgment, the discernment to identify what it could be that is stopping you from moving from being an individual to being a unit with a loved one. I hope that's been useful.